Who's up? Who's down? Let's take a look at the NFL Power Rankings. NFL Power Rankings after week number 3 in the NFL. We'll start at the bottom and work our way up. At 32, it is the New Orleans Saints. This feels pretty obvious. They got absolutely walloped by Seattle, and we kind of said that going into the week. Congratulations for keeping it close in your first couple of games, but this is an entirely different animal, and that proved to be very accurate. They're not a good football team right now. At 31, it's the Miami Dolphins. At least they showed some fight on Thursday night against the Buffalo Bills, but still some major questions remain. At 30, it's the Tennessee Titans. It's looking further and further away from a good football team after another tough one against the Indianapolis Colts, and now they're already making changes at play calling and stuff like that. So some issues ahead, I suppose, for the Tennessee Titans. At 29, it is the New York Giants. They make the change at quarterback. We will get to that in a little bit. By the way, the fantasy football stuff has been a whole lot of fun the last couple of days. So if you do have any fantasy football questions, throw them in the chat. We're not talking fantasy football right now, but after this, going to be breaking down every game. For those watching the live stream, going to be breaking down every game from a picks aspect and from a from a fantasy football aspect as well. So get your fantasy football questions in the chat. But the Giants at 29, it's a disaster there right now, and I really disagree with the move of Jackson Dart getting the start this week. I'll explain a little bit later on, and for those watching the video after, that'll be in a different video, but it's a really bad situation that I think they're making worse right now. And at 28, it is the Cincinnati Bengals, just an absolute, again, unmitigated disaster last week against the Minnesota Vikings. So our bottom 5, New Orleans, Miami, Tennessee, the Giants, and the Bengals. At 27, it's the Carolina Panthers, moving up a little bit because they picked up a shutout blowout win on Sunday. We're not going to overreact to it, but you got to give a team some credit when they go out and put on a performance like that one. Coming in at 26, it is the Dallas Cowboys. Chicago whooped them, and now they're having injury problems, and the really only blue chip player that they have is out of the lineup for a few weeks. So things are going to go from bad to worse for the Cowboys. At 25, the Cleveland Browns with one of the surprise wins of the day on Sunday over Green Bay, moving up in the power rankings a little bit. At 24, it's Arizona. That was a really bad loss against San Francisco. I know the 49ers are a pretty good team, but they picked up a safety to take the lead and had the ball with about 4 minutes left and couldn't put that game away. That's a very concerning sign for Arizona. At 23, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. I continue to not have a whole lot to say about them, but I don't think they're very good. At 22, it's the New York Jets. That was a wild one against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I know they are 0-3, maybe deserve to be. I could see Arizona fans being a little upset with Arizona being below the Jets right now, but Arizona hasn't impressed me at all in any of their games, and not that the Jets have either, but maybe that's one that could be switched going into next week, but I have been really disappointed with what I've seen from Arizona, so maybe I'm being a little bit too hard on them. At 21, it's Atlanta. We're going to react to getting shut out by one of the worst teams in the league. We're not going to overreact, though. We can, because I am fully intending on just writing off the Green Bay loss last week as one bad day, so we can do that for Atlanta as well, but there are concerning signs ahead. At 20, it's the Patriots. That was a just ass-ugly loss against the Pittsburgh Steelers. At 19, the Houston Texans. The problems continue for that offensive line, and now I think there are big concerns for the Texans going forward. At 18, it is the Las Vegas Raiders. I think we're starting to see a few of the cracks in the armor that maybe people were overlooking when they were getting excited about this team in training camp. At 17, it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think right around the middle is right where they deserve to be right now. 16, it's the Chicago Bears. They finally were able to put together a big performance against Dallas. Now an interesting test against the Raiders lies ahead. At 15, it's the Denver Broncos. Disappointing loss against the LA Chargers, who look very for real. At 14, the Minnesota Vikings. They head out to Dublin 1 off of one of the more dominant defensive performances you will see. So I'm still very high on this Minnesota team. At 13, it's Indy. Another test passed. But they face their biggest obstacle this week. At 12, it is the Seattle Seahawks. That defense is for real. I don't think that offense is going to be putting up 40 points a week, but the defense is for real. And I slept on them, and I'm willing to admit that I did. At 11, it is San Francisco. Injuries continue to pile up, but they continue to squeak out some victories. We'll see what happens with them this week. Now we are into our top 10. At 10, it is the LA Rams. I have been very impressed with this team, and I think that they have really shown, that was a tough loss against the Eagles, but this team has shown that they are, again, legitimate threats in the AFC West. At 9, it's Kansas City. I can't knock them out of the top 10. They finally get a win. We can't knock them out of the top 10 until we see what this whole team is like with Rice and Worthy back at receiver. At 8, it is Baltimore setting up. That was quite the loss and a bit of an eye-opener against Detroit. I do think there are some things that people are overlooking for narrative, and we'll get into that maybe as the previews go along, but we have a massive game coming up against Kansas City this week with Baltimore and the Chiefs, and oh boy, one of those teams is going to be 1-3. At 7, it's Washington. Again, it's a win over the Raiders. It is whatever, but you got to win with your backup quarterback. You're feeling pretty good about things. At 6, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers maybe took a little bit too much to beat the New York Jets, but still a win is a win. 3 game-winning drives to start the year for Baker Mayfield has this team right on the cusp of the top 5, which we will get to in just a second. But first, if you could help out Couch Potato Diary by hitting that share button on this video or on the podcast that you're listening to, share it with a couple people, and we can keep the conversations going here on Couch Potato Diary. At 5, it is the Detroit Lions. I was down on Detroit for big parts of the offseason, and I still have some concerns about this team long term, but it's a couple very impressive wins in a row for this team. So there is no denying how high level this football team is right now. At 4, we have the Green Bay Packers. I know, that was a bad loss against Cleveland. There is, again, no denying that was a bad loss against the Browns, but through 2 weeks they looked absolutely dominant, and I'm willing to believe that A, maybe we're underrating Cleveland a little bit, and B, that was just a foot off the gas pedal type of a game, but a concerning one nonetheless. Swig of water before our top 3. At number 3, it is the LA Chargers. They have put together 3 very good performances. They have beat all 3 teams in their division. This was their first Sunday game of the year after a Friday out in Sao Paulo and a Monday night against the Raiders. To come out on Sunday afternoon and beat the Broncos, Justin Herbert looks fantastic. This defense is solid. This is a very good football team. At 2, it's Philadelphia. A couple big plays help save the day with the Eagles, but they are still... They showed a few more things that I think actually make you feel pretty comfortable about where this team is at right now. So I have them at number 2, and the number 1 team in the land still, the Buffalo Bills. They had that massive win on the first Sunday nighter of the year and have not really slowed down since. So we continue to have the Buffalo Bills high up in the power rankings. Toxic in the chat, not necessarily agreeing with where we have the Green Bay Packers right now at number 4. I get it was a bad loss against Cleveland, and there are certain teams that I'm not giving the benefit of the doubt to. I will with this one. I think you can easily see a bad Cleveland team, a look ahead to a matchup with Dallas on Sunday night the next week. I think Green Bay bounces back in a big time way this week. But I'm sure Toxic in the Twitch chat, not the only one who has a disagreement with me. Throw that into the chat or in the comments if you're watching after, or if you're listening, get at me on social media. I am at Primetime Klein, wherever you are socially on the media, and we can discuss that further. But yeah, let me know what you think about the power rankings. If you missed any of them, or just want to bring Couch Potato Diary with you wherever you go, you can catch us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Basically, what I'm telling you is that this show is a podcast. Just search Couch Potato Diary wherever you get your podcasts.